Welcome everyone to our 101 for businesses and business-to-business writing. My name is Amy. I am the customer support lead at ProWritingAid, and the webinar today will be hosted by Micah McGuire, who does our B2B digital marketing. And yeah, it's wonderful that you could join us. We're so glad that you're here. For this session, we're going to walk through a few of the following things, some more in depth and some as more of an overview. The most important features and reports for business writers that are found on the ProWritingAid tool, including Real-Time Checker and the Goals feature. Also the Summary Report, the Readability Report, the Style Report, the Sticky Sentences Report, and also tools that come with our program for business writers that use Chrome and Google Chrome. We'd really like for this also to be driven by what you, the user, would like to know. So we're going to leave the last 5 to 10 minutes for a Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. And if your question isn't answered during this webinar, you can drop us a line at hello@prowritingaid.com right after this call, and just make sure that in the subject you put that you are at the business Q&A, and I'll make sure to get back to you as quickly as I can. And with all that being said, please feel free to again drop your comments or questions in the Q&A, and I'm just going to put into the chat the support inbox email address so that you know where you can direct your questions if we don't get to them during the webinar. All right, over to you, Micah.
Thanks, Amy. Guys, those of you who are used to seeing me do the intros here and seeing Tom in my place, Tom is off, hopefully having a lovely holiday, so I'm taking over for him this month. The demo may be a little bit different than what he usually does, so you guys just bear with me just a little bit. But we are going to be covering some of the same things. So like Amy said, covering the goals and the real-time checker, covering the summary report, covering the readability report, the style report, and the sticky sentences report. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, so here I just have an example document that is under our web editor. And those of you who have already signed up for an account might be familiar with this already. Here, this is the usual toolbar that you'll see. But before we go ahead and dive into the nitty-gritty of starting to correct this document and improve everything, I do want to draw your attention to the Settings tab. So the Settings tab is a great place to go ahead and get your document set up before you actually dive into your corrections, because there are some important features here that can kind of affect the reports. So first and foremost, we have the ability to choose your dialect of English. We have choices between British, US, Australian, and Canadian English. If you happen to choose General English, that will accept all comers, so it will not make a differentiation between color, perhaps spelled with an L-O-R, versus color spelled with an L-O-U-R. So all of that is going to be accepted under General English. In this case, I just have it under US English. From there, we have the next setting, which is our style. Because we are here for Business 101, I naturally have this set to business. And then finally, we really get to the most important function on this tab, which is your document type. And the reason this is so important is that if you take a look, first of all, we have a lot of different documents here. We have documents for academics, we have documents for creative writers, but then most importantly for all of you, we have these business documents. And these are use cases that will give you specific goals and specific feedback that is related to the analysis that we have done on each of these document types. So you'll notice in a minute, I'm going to change some of these settings around and show you the difference, but each of these cases is going to show you a slightly different goal and a slightly different setting than each of the others. We're going to start off with general business just to begin. So here, I just click general business. So we're back in the main editor, and you can see we have this side panel. If I click on the real-time checker, I can toggle the real-time checker off, or I can toggle it back on, and therefore get that sidebar. You can see I already have 28 improvements that I could possibly make in this document, and that is broken down further in this sidebar. So first, we have the goals, which is going to show you where all of your where your document is with these reports. So you can see here, I have some that are in this orange/gold color. Those are the ones that are in need of improvement, because you can see here, this gray kind of bubble is sort of our target range for each of these reports. So in this case, my grammar, spelling, and style really needs to be up much, much higher. We need 0 mistakes here. I'm down here with only 37% of that complete, so I need to bring that number up. On the other hand, my compliance to the style guide, I am well within that bubble, so I am at 100% here. So that is a nice green indicator. And as you scroll down, you can see different reports. I've done terribly when it comes to business jargon. My readability is really just out of range, so I probably need to take a look at that. My sentence variety is good. My passive voice is okay. I'm using a few too many weak adverbs. May need to take a look at that, because I am on that upper edge of tolerance for that goal. But you can see this is showing me where I need to work and where I am doing well. And all of these will actually update as I make corrections in the document. So as I start to make spelling corrections, you will see this number improve. As I make changes to my sentence length, you will see this number start to come down this way. Now, the fun thing about this that gets back to those settings that I discussed, I just have things set to a general business document right now, but let's say I go ahead and set it to what this document actually is, which is an email. So if I pop it over to general email, look at that. I have now gone from 61% of my goals achieved to only 57%. So I have actually decreased. And the reason for that is if we scroll down to the bottom of the goals, I have this brand new goal, which is the positivity goal. And you can see here, I am just out of range on the bottom end. So I need to work on being a little bit more positive. Maybe this is kind of a Debbie Downer email, but all of this is factoring into play. So that's why choosing your document type is going to be incredibly important. Now, when it comes to actually starting to make your corrections, there's a couple of different ways we can do this within the real-time checker. First, you can come over here and hover over any of these underlined items. And if I wanted to make this correction, all I would need to do is click within this teal area and it will correct for me, just like that. Or let's say I want to actually pop on to the next correction without having to just hover over each. I can come here and hit this downward facing arrow and it will lead me on to the next correction I could possibly make. So that's one way to work through your document. The other is to actually come back over to the sidebar and look at this improvements pane. So you can see here, again, just like I have the underlines here, each of these is just in kind of chronological order of where it is occurring in the document. I can click through each, accept, refuse, all of that good stuff. And I do want to point out a couple of different things with both our spelling errors and with our rules. So you'll notice here, I have these two other options underneath the spelling error, that I have an add to dictionary and I have an ignore. On add to dictionary, basically, if this happened to be correct, let's say I'm in a highly technical field, and instead of this being a misspelling of transformation, it's actually a correct spelling of, say, maybe a part name or a chemical name or something like that, I could easily just add that to the dictionary. And just like you can do with Word, it will add, and you will never see that as a incorrect suggestion again. The other thing I can do is I can also ignore this point, and I can say, you know, I just don't want to bother with that right now. And whenever you do that, the document will say, okay, you know, that is obviously not a spelling I need to remember, but for this document, I'm not going to bother with pulling that up again. So, and then this is slightly different when it comes to our rules. So you can see here, I have a possible missing determiner. This should be is the right vendor instead of right vendor. Well, underneath that, I have that great ignore function if I need to just ignore that rule. But then I have this disable rule function. And really for our rules, like our style rules and things like that, we really don't suggest using this disable rule, because this actually will disable the rule permanently from a user standpoint, unless you pop in over to our support team and ask them, you know, hey, from the back end, could you go ahead and re-enable this rule for me? So at the moment, there's really no way from the user end for users to go back in and toggle rules on and off. You would have to talk to support. So instead of using disable rule, we highly recommend you just use that ignore function, because again, it will have the same function within the document. If there's something that's bugging you, like you're using a sentence fragment and you intend to use that sentence fragment, then it's not going to be an issue. But here, again, this is actually a correct suggestion that I do need to have the right vendor instead of right vendor. So I'll just click there and accept that suggestion. Now, I can go through and work through the document in that way, which, Amy, did you have something to add on?
I just wanted to quickly touch on the idea of the ignore button and reassure you all that it actually does not negatively impact your score. We recently have implemented something that allows the score to change in accordance with what you ignore. So I get a lot of questions about that in the support inbox, and I just want to reassure you, if you click ignore, it's going to help your score. It's going to become part of your particular I don't know, setup.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out before we move on.
Yeah, Amy, that's an excellent point. That is something that, let's say you're intentionally using fragments or something like that, and you don't want that to pop up as impacting your score. So maybe the style score is saying, oh, well, you have fragments and this is wrong. If you click ignore on those fragments, your style score will immediately go back up to 100% if those are the only two errors that you have left. So that way, all of this is going to be factored in. So we're not forcing you to make any changes. You have complete control over this. And that's really the emphasis with ProWritingAid, is that writing must have a human touch to it. So that's why we always make sure that you guys are going to ultimately be the ones in control. We're just making suggestions. Now, from here, I could certainly spend all of my time in the real-time checker and work through this entire document. And most likely, if I am just trying to get a quick little email off, let's say it's something that's back and forth internal with my team, then usually the real checker might suffice. But let's say it's a longer document. Maybe this is a client that I'm very worried about wanting to impress and make sure that this is a super clear email. That's where we want to start digging into these reports. And we have probably about 19 plus reports that you can use. Please do not use all of them. You will be here for hours on any one given document if you try to run all of these reports. And some of them are not going to be as relevant to you as business writers. There are some that are more directed as creative writers. In this case, usually our business writers have about 3 to 5 reports that they run regularly. Those are primarily going to be the ones that we cover: summary, readability, sticky, the grammar and spelling reports, and the style reports. So usually those are the main ones that are most helpful to business writers. But there are some others, like the all repeats, maybe the length, some of the transition functions that may also be helpful. And that's when the magic of the summary report comes into play. And you'll see here, this is again going to look very familiar from our goals sidebar. It is the same type of UX here. We basically have this bubble that is our goal versus where we are actually at. So again, as your document changes, you will see all of these numbers change just like you would in the goals sidebar. And the reason we have this key scores is because your grammar, style, and spelling are the 3 reports that pretty much anyone should be running on any of their documents. It doesn't matter if you're a creative writer, an academic writer, or a business writer. Those are the main ones that really function on kind of a correct versus incorrect function. That if you have a spelling error there, it's likely going to pop up. If you have a grammar error there, it's going to pop up. There's some things with your style that sometimes can make things an easier read for your audience. So those are why those are up here at the top. Then if we continue to scroll down, we have this, where the document looks good. So I can see here already from just making a couple of little changes, my readability grade has actually come down from 11 to 10. So again, I'm still on the, upper edge of that bubble. I'm probably going to take a look at that report just to get it down a little bit further, but I'm within range. And then if I keep going, I have where the document's probably going to need work. I've got that business jargon, kind of haunting me here. I'm still working on getting that positivity score up. All of these things are places to improve. And this is where I would recommend that everyone start if they're first using the program. Because what's going to happen is you're going to rapidly notice that just based on your writing style and how you write personally, you're going to run into the same reports popping up over and over again. Now, hopefully as time goes on, You'll be able to learn new things about, say, grammar. Maybe you have a problem with getting a lot of comma splices, but as you use ProWritingAid more and more, you learn to recognize those, so you get fewer and fewer splices as time goes on. But for the most part, there are certain things that all of us struggle with. For me, readability is always a big one that I have to go back in and check, because even though the document may look good as a whole, sometimes I've got very difficult to read paragraphs in there that I really need to do some work on. So I know that's one of the reports that I'll always check. So the summary report is a good place to get started, because you'll start noticing as you run this every time on your document, you'll go, okay, well, I'm constantly needing to pop into the style score, or I'm constantly needing to pop into the sentence length report. And that will kind of guide you to the point that eventually you may not even need to run this report. You may just be able to say, you know, I'm just going to run these 5 because I know these are the 5 reports I have trouble with. The other thing about the style report is it does give you some extra information. So if we're going to pop back up here to the readability report, all I have to do is click on the hyperlink here, and it is going to take me down to an in-depth explanation of this readability report. So you can see here is my score, and then here's a short explanation of what the readability score is determined by, how it works, why it's important. And then here I have a nice visual on showing my easy to read paragraphs in this document versus my slightly difficult to read paragraphs versus my very difficult to read paragraphs. And all of that kind of visual function shows up in this summary report. So we have several. The sentence length report will show you visuals, things like that. So this gives you a little bit more information than our goals toolbar does. Now, if I'm going to go ahead and take that and maybe say, okay, I'm going to start with my readability report here. All I have to do is exit out of the summary report, come over here to readability, turn that readability report on, and there I am. So you'll see here over in the sidebar, I've had the sidebar change again to solely focus on readability. And if I pop this drop down arrow here, you can see I've got a Flesch Reading Ease score of 63.4 on this document, and I've got a Flesch Kincaid grade of 9.5. So these scores are related. Your Flesch Reading Ease is determined by the length of your sentences and the number of syllables per word. So essentially what's happening there is it's looking at to see if you have a very long, complex sentence, and it's also looking to see if you have a lot of long, complex words. Chances are, if you have a lot of long, complex words and long, complex sentences, it's going to be harder to read. That is then translated over to this analog with this Flesch Kincaid grade, and this is actually a grade level determiner. So here, this is actually referring to a 9th grade reading level. And this is not to say that this Flesch Reading Ease Kincaid score is you're trying to make your writing appeal to a bunch of middle schoolers and early high schoolers. It's just that in the analysis that we have done in looking at readability ease and documents that are nice and easy to read, those scores are going to fall somewhere between a 6th grade and a 10th grade reading level. Above that, things get a little bit harder to read. You start getting into 11th and 12th grade reading level, it starts becoming more difficult, and it's more work for your audience to get through. So that's why we suggest this 6 to 10. Now, you can also check out your very difficult to read paragraphs. So here, goodness, I have a 42.1 Flesch Reading Ease score. That is a very hard to read paragraph. And then further down the page, I have a couple of slightly difficult to read. If I click here, it's going to come down here and you can see it highlighted in gold. Here is another slightly difficult to read with a 50.2. And then my last paragraph is also slightly difficult to read, 58. So I'm doing a little bit better. This one will hopefully only need a little bit of work, but it could still use some help. Now, a couple of different ways that we can deal with readability is we can take a look at the paragraphs that are hard to read and slightly difficult to read and say, okay, are there places that maybe I could divide this paragraph up into 2 parts? Are there ways that I could make shorter sentences in these paragraphs? Are there ways that I could replace words? So let's look at this first sentence. The rest of the company is not quite as expeditious in catching up with us. So here, instead of using expeditious, maybe I say, you know, I'm just going to work with quick instead of expeditious. And that is getting a long, complex word out of the way. So that's one way to look at readability. But let's say maybe you're having a little bit more trouble with a paragraph. Maybe you're looking at it and going, well, I don't see a way that I could easily break it up. I don't see a way that I could kind of get some of these complex wording out of it. That's where our style report kind of comes into play. And here with the style report, you can see instantly I have 15 different readability enhancements, and the style check is a very, very rich report that has a ton of different functions in it. You can see I have functions on adverbs. I have functions on style improvements, passive voice. If I take a look at these style improvements, here we go. I'm having problems with business jargon. That replaces all of the business jargon that I was having trouble with. So instead of saying cutting edge, let's say groundbreaking. Instead of maybe looking at bandwidth, we just say capacity instead. So that's one way to start taking the work off your reader. And I could just sit here and go through and take and click all of these readability enhancements and add those in, and that would rapidly start to improve my readability. Another interesting one I do want to kind of bring to mind here is the passive voice function. And here you can see I have this sentence, a number of meetings have been held, that can then be reworded in a number of different ways to translate it into the active voice. And in business, I would say that passive voice along with business jargon are probably two of our 7 deadly sins when it comes to business writing. In business, we tend to use it because it makes us sound formal and it makes things perhaps sound important. But in reality, it can be a function that makes it harder to read and puts more work on your reader. Again, the ultimate goal of good writing is to make your reader work as little as possible. Now, let's say that perhaps you're looking at passive voice and you're going, well, I'm not quite certain what passive voice is versus active voice. I don't know why it's important. All you need to do is click on this golden eye, and there will be a quick pop-up. Here we go. That will explain what is passive voice and how can you change it to active. And here we have a little multimedia video of Jackie Chan explaining the passive voice. And you can kind of see here, we have a little explanation of why passive voice is a problem. You need to wait till the end of the sentence to find out who is doing the action. But on the other hand, another thing I want to point out is in the next paragraph, we do say sometimes you'll need to use the passive voice because the subject of the sentence is unknown or it doesn't matter. That is a case where that passive voice is legitimate. And this gets into an excellent point with the style check that I want to stress to everyone, is that unlike the spelling and grammar report, the style check is not necessarily a right or wrong. It is simply a number of suggestions that may be improvements. There may come a time where you look at the passive verbiage that is found in your writing and you go, actually, I need that passive sentence. That's a good place to go ahead and hit that ignore button because the system is making those suggestions. And you as a writer have to look at it and say, okay, do I think this is correct or do I think this is something that is unnecessary and I can just go ahead and skip over it? But in this case, a number of meetings have been held. I think we have a good case for going ahead and converting that to active voice when we have held a number of meetings. And then I can take and look at this other one. The proposition has been accepted by the majority of our shareholders. Correct there, and then make this correction and just enhance the readability by reducing that. And you can see already I'm doing a great job just by going through some of the style report functions of shortening up sentences, making things easier to read, making it less work on my reader ultimately. Now, sometimes the style report is not quite enough. Sometimes you will go through the entire style report, you will pop back to your readability, and your readability will still be on the edge. That is a case where another one of our reports can come in handy, which is our sticky sentence report. And I think this is probably a team favorite out of all of our reports. I know Tom loves it. Our CEO loves it because he refers to these sticky sentences as kind of the cholesterol in your writing. So this is one that all of us at ProWritingAid love to use. And what it functions as is looking for the number of glue words in your writing. So a glue word are some of the most common words in the English language that hold sentences together without actually telling you much. So this would be things like articles, the, an, as, all of that sort of thing. Others might be, you can see here, I have around, last, back, wanted. All of those are functioning as glue words. And if you've ever run into a sentence that's really, really long that you've read it and gone, that really didn't say anything, chances are you're dealing with a sticky sentence. You can see here, I've got both a semi-sticky target and then I've also got sticky sentences here. So I'm going to just take and turn those semi-sticky sentences off for now and jump to my one sticky sentence instead. So again, this sentence is 70% glue words. And if you look, almost all of the words that are listed as glue words, you almost have this entire sentence listed just by listing out what the glue words are in the sentence. Now, here's another point that comes back to a matter of style. When it comes to rewriting sticky sentences, there is no one correct way to do it. It will all vary from writer to writer. If you give 1,000 different writers the same sticky sentence, I'm sure you will come back with 1,000 different ways to rewrite it into a non-sticky sentence. If you look at how Tom usually rewrites this one in previous Business 101s, you'll see he does a slightly different take on it than I will. Here, I would probably say, I wanted to check in on the project we discussed last month. And then here, just going to rerun the sticky report and make sure that is not still a sticky sentence. And there we go. No more sticky sentences found in my document. So I can spend all of my time functioning on the semi-sticky sentences, getting those into shape, getting some of those glue words out. So again, remember, this is something that comes down to your personal style and your personal taste. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's just a matter of, can you reduce these numbers and start improving these scores that are over on the readability side? You can see just from the few checks that we've done, we're basically making improvements step by step. Now, with that being said, we have kind of covered the main reports for business writers. Like I said, there may be a few others that are helpful, but it all kind of depends on a case-by-case basis. I do want to jump into a couple of our tools for business writers that everyone gets a lot of use out of, and that is our style guide and our snippets tool. So we're going to pop here to our style guide. And Tom usually has an assortment of rules here. He is one of the main folks to help our clients with getting their style guide set up. So he has a variety. I have basically a much more limited guide, but I am going to cover some of the rules, kind of go over a simple case and then a more advanced case. So if you're trying to create, say, just simple rules, we have one here that is about ProWritingAid for business. So let's say you're doing some rebranding like we are, and we're looking to get this brand name correct. If I click on that, I open up a window that has 4 entry forms into it. The first would be the wrong sentence that has the phrase that needs to be corrected. The next is the incorrect phrase that needs to be matched. So here I am trying to replace ProWritingAid for business. So there, and that's in my match case. And then I have my replacement, which is going to be ProWritingAid business. And then here you have the ability to add a message. And I've just said, please use ProWritingAid business. It's shorter. So that's starting to get our brand name into shape here. If I go ahead and just click test rule, I have a suggest that 4, and it is omitting that. So let's take a look at how that works once we actually jump into the document. I just clear some space here. That real-time checker has already caught that rule for me. And there we go. I have that suggestion to make that correction. So that is kind of a simpler case. We see it used a lot with branding names. I know several universities who have worked with us have asked us to kind of make corrections in that way. And that's a nice, simple rule. Now, a lot of that is covered in our Style Guide 101 article, which I believe Amy will have in the chat shortly. She actually already does. And that is our basic style guide rule article. But then we get into some more advanced rules that you can see here. So in one case, we actually had a chemical company that was kind of sick of seeing everyone use good and bad reagents whenever they wanted to see inappropriate or appropriate used. So this, as you can see, starts getting a little bit trickier. I have my incorrect sentence of a variety of good reagents, and then I have this match. But you'll notice I have in parentheses both good and bad in front of this reagents. So here, what this is telling the style guide is to look for either good reagents or bad reagents as the match. And if this sentence said a variety of bad reagents, it would still match to this function. So that's where those parentheticals come into play. Then I've got my replacement, and this is where things start to get a little bit tricky because it's involving a little something called tokenization. So you can see this $1 function here. Tokenization is referring to the way that phrases are broken down from a programming standpoint. So here, like a lot of other programming languages, the tokenization is going to start at 0. So if we were going to say that match here, this good or bad, is actually considered $0. This reagents is considered $1. So what is happening here is we're telling the program, okay, take this $0 function and replace it with appropriate or inappropriate. But for this second word, which is your $1, leave that word in place. And then from here, you'll also see we have this @ sign, and that's just saying suggest either appropriate or inappropriate. So what's happening here is we have appropriate reagents or inappropriate reagents. And again, down here, I have the message at the bottom, please use appropriate or inappropriate. If I test that rule out, seems to be working. Let's go ahead and see how it works once I jump onto the actual document. You can see here, there's that appropriate reagents versus inappropriate reagents. If I was working through this document, I would say, okay, it's a good reagent, so therefore it's an appropriate reagent, not an inappropriate reagent. So that covers a little bit about our style guide, and you can find out plenty more, especially about those advanced style guide rules, because this is going to get into tokenization, parts of speech tags, all of this kind of more programming related area. You can find that covered in our advanced style guide article. Again, see the chat. I believe Amy already has those up. Now, the other tool I wanted to cover very quickly is our Snippets tool. So this is one that we are very, very excited to have on hand. This allows you to basically shortcut cutting and copying and pasting any sort of text. So let's say you have a lot of repetitive text you have to type. A snippet would be a perfect case for you. So here you can see we have a lot of keyboard characters that are not on the keyboard. So let's say I do a lot of recipes and I need the degree symbol for functioning on, showing oven temperatures, things like that. All I have to do here is click, and I have this set up. I have the label, which is simply the name of the snippet. I have my shortcut, which in this case, all I have to do is type this \VEG, and it will pop up and I can select it. And then down here, I have the replacement that I want to use. So if we go and pop back into the document and \DEG, there we go. I've just selected that degree symbol and have that available at anytime I am using ProWritingAid's functions. Now, this is also great for any kind of formatted text. You can see here, this is a rich text editor. So anytime you are pasting into a rich text box, these functions will be available. So in this case, I'm actually going to pull up one from our support side, which is that style guide. So you can see here, I have the link here, and if I post there, then there we go. I have the Style Guide 101 article open. So you can see how that can be really helpful if you have links or other kinds of formatting that you need to include and add in whenever you're using your snippets. Now, the last thing I'd like to cover is some of our integrations. So that's a very important part of our tool because it allows you to have extended functionality. Basically, if you pop over to our homepage and scroll to the footer, you can see our assortment of integrations. We have our web editor that we were just working in a few moments ago. We also have browser extensions for pretty much every browser out there except for Microsoft Internet Explorer. So we have Chrome, we have Firefox, we have Safari, and Edge. We have an integration for Google Docs. We have one for Microsoft Office that covers both Outlook and Word. So that's great if you do a lot of work within Microsoft's ecosystem. And then if you happen to use some programs that are usually a lot more creative writers, but some people use them for larger research projects, things like that, we do have a desktop app that covers file types like Scrivener. So all of those are available and you can download those at any time. If you are a premium user, they are totally free to use, included in your account. If you are currently a free user, then they will give you a 1-week trial to give them a try and see if you like them. When you upgrade to premium, you'll have full use of them 100% of the time. And I do want to quickly show you what Chrome's extension looks like. You can see here, I've just taken and copy and pasted the original document that I was working on into an email. And you can see here, I have all of these highlight functions that are usually present in the real-time editor. So all I would need to do is start clicking through those, making those changes. And let's say perhaps maybe I want to get into some of the larger reports. Maybe I want to see my goals. This small gold dot down here that is going to mouse over into a teal dot, if you click that, that's first time is going to open your goals and your improvement sidebar. And then let's say we want to see the full reports, open the full editor, and you have all of those reports available to you. Any changes that you make here are going to be reflected in the email. So let's say, let's remove that all of. So carry out these efforts. If I exit out here, then we can see that it has reflected in the document here. So it all takes it back to that point and click function. This is a great one for a lot of our business users, especially if you use Gmail's web editor a lot. If you're doing emails in your browser, this is a great one to have on hand. Or if you need to do applications or anything that takes basically any rich text box, ProWritingAid will be able to pop up and help you out with your writing. So, Amy, I believe we have covered all of our topics. Do we have anything in Q&A?
Nothing in Q&A so far. I encourage you all to ask questions, even if it seems like something that's outside of the scope of business or it's something that you wish we had covered that we didn't cover, please let us know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, I think, Amy, do we have one on security?
Yes, we do. Can you tell us a little bit about the security requirements and also how we keep our users' information secure?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I do want to say that ProWritingAid is both HIPAA compliant and GDPR compliant. We are currently working towards SOC 2 compliance, but I think we should hopefully be there soon. But just to let everybody know, within our program, save for the web editor, there is no data persistence. So if you are using one of our browser extensions, if you are using our desktop extension, something like that, that data is simply going to be sent to our servers temporarily. It's going to bounce back with the corrections that need to be made, and then all of that data is wiped. The only case that I believe I know of that has data persistence is going to be within that web editor if you save documents. And that's because if you save those documents within the web editor, naturally we have to have those stored so you can access them again when you log back into your account. So that would be some data persistence there. But again, you can easily get around that by using one of our extensions, by using our desktop extension or our Microsoft Office extension. But for companies that may need higher levels of security, let's say you deal with a lot of sensitive customer information, a lot of sensitive client information, we have the option of doing on-premise deployments. And in that case, you would be working with us and we would basically make a version of ProWritingAid that can be totally run on your own servers. So basically, instead of popping over to our Microsoft Azure servers, which are excellent when it comes to security, it would all be run on your company's personal servers. No data would come out of your ecosystem. It would all be contained right there. We would have no access to it. It would be totally in company. So that's great for companies that need a little bit of extra security when it comes to keeping data safe. Well, Amy, I think we have gotten all of our questions on the Q&A, so I think we will go ahead and wrap things up. Again, guys, if you have any questions that you happen to think of perhaps after the session, anything like that, please feel free to email hello@ProWritingAid.com. Again, that's HELLO@ProWritingAid.com. It was great seeing you all here. Hope you all have a great rest of your day and rest of your week.